Okay, we have more people joining. Welcome, everyone. And I think well, yeah, we have the recording on. So if anyone joins at any point, just join in. But at the end of the day, we'll have the recording and we'll be able to share it. So let's just start because at some point, I really am grateful that you found some time to join us today on this Friday morning, day, evening, depending on where you are. Um, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Natalie, and I promise not to ask too many tricky questions. And here we are joined by two really inspiring guests. Brandy, the founder and owner of Loyal Transportation, successful company based in the Niagara region in Canada, and then president of the Transportation Alliance, an organization that has been representing and supporting professional passenger transportation for more than a century. Guys, do you mind if we actually continue on this on the first name basis without any formalities?
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely.
Cool. Thank you so much. So one more time, thank you so much for joining. And let's start by, well, I'll start by giving you more time to talk than I usually do myself. So Brandy, welcome. And could you please start by telling us a little bit about yourself and of course, Lowell Transportation?
Sure. I am a mother. My husband and I had lived in Niagara Region, Ontario for his whole life, and for me about 15 years. And I, at the time when we were starting up Loyal Transportation, was a struggling mom of many. And I had difficulty finding work that could provide for many kids, and I had difficulty finding transportation in our area. So we actually had found that there were illegal underground cabs growing so that the community could support the community because there wasn't a lot of access. And actually, we had started by working for one of those companies, and then kind of got the idea that we could do it better and that we could. I'm big on reading the law, and I figured out a way to talk to the police about the bylaw and changing things so that small businesses could operate and do essentially what everybody was creating on their own underground.
Okay, you've mentioned family company, right? And many kids. So who else is helping?
Well, my husband is a great spokesperson, and he was the original driver along with his brother, David. So what would happen is that they would go out and they would be the drivers, and he would promote, like, do you know that Loyal exists and that we were licensed to operate and so on. We also have my son, Logan. He is our accountant. He does handle a lot of the paperwork when it comes to tax time or whenever we have to do, cash out crediting, anything like that. My daughter, Sky, the oldest, she had been a driver. She was one of the youngest drivers to be a TNC license in Niagara. And she also had answered the dispatch phone for a while. And now in Florida, she works for a different part of advertising, and she's going to be our gopher in Florida when we open operations here.
Oh, so
I
that's the plan?
other daughter also works for Loyal. She handles the paperwork that handles Niagara Region has a lot of requirements, so she
Mhm.
has to respond back and forth there. But we've really kind of suckered in anybody in the family and friends and said this is a great mission, help the community, help us, help them, and got everybody involved really.
Cool. Thank you so much. Okay, now a little bit about our second guest today, Dan. Great to see you here as well. Okay, you are the president of the transportation. Okay, I've almost like I had it repeated several times to make it sound properly. And I know that Alliances works worldwide and it plays an important role. So for those who might have never heard about you yet, could you please give us a quick overview of what the Alliance is, its history, and how it supports company like, let's say, like Brandy's here?
Sure. Yeah, we've been around for over 100 years. We've had numerous different names. Um, I think it was initially the American Taxi Owners Association, and then it became the National Association of Taxi Owners back in the early 1900s. But that acronym NATO soon became much more
Occupied.
familiar to another organization, and became the American Taxi Association, and then it as the footprint expanded internationally, became the International Taxi Association. And then in recognition of the expanding parameters of motor vehicle for hire, it was changed several decades back to the Taxi Limousine Paratransit Association, and then in 2000, I want to say it was 2017, really in kind of the real recognition of how the industry is really going, we just became the Transportation Alliance in recognition that there really are not taxi companies and NEMT companies and microtransit companies. There's everybody doing a little bit of everything. We are a provider centric organization. Um, we obviously have had a lot of interesting, um, I don't want to say challenges, but I will say challenges. In the few years, I mean, Uber put a big dent in the taxi market, and that was the strongest part of our membership at one point. COVID didn't do anything to help. Um, and right now, our primary membership, we have a few international organizations that are members, as opposed to international companies that are really members. Australia, New Zealand, and a couple in Europe, and then we have quite a few members from our friends up north in Canada, Canadian members. And then the bulk of our membership is here in the United States, and they're for hire passenger transportation, ground transportation fleet operators, from as small as somebody in their first vehicle to companies such as Z-Trip that have thousands of vehicles. And so we really represent the interest of the operators and the providers.
That's amazing. But how did you personally get involved in this,
How did I get
mobility?
involved?
Yes.
So I had a prior career in finance and mergers and acquisitions, right up until 2008. Anybody who was around in 2008 might remember there
Oh,
was
yes.
a little upheaval in the financial markets, and I soon found myself needing to get a new career. And I had been advising companies for years on buying and selling companies, and turning over companies. So I thought, well, let me see if I can put into practice what I've been getting paid to advise people to do for years. And so I decided to start my own business. My background had kind of told me that I wanted to get into an industry in which the technology had not been readily adopted, in which it was highly fragmented, and that had a market play to the aging baby boomer population. And without really realizing it at the time, that defined the non-emergency medical transportation to a T at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was being done on paper. It was small mom and pop companies, and obviously the aging population was going to be key. So I got into NEMT, and immediately thought, okay, I've got to find out other people who are doing this, and I've got to find out, better ways to do
Mm-hmm.
things. Did a little, this is 2010, so there was no chat GPT or anything, and Google was kind of in its infancy form, but I did some searching, and found the Transportation Alliance, TLPA, at the time, and it was really the only organization I could find that had any members who did non-emergency medical transportation, and so I got involved, because I knew that I just needed to be able to talk to other people, because I wasn't going to be coming up with unique problems, and I didn't want to be reinventing the wheel constantly. So if I could learn from others and share ideas with others, that's what I want. So that's how I got into the Transportation Alliance. That was in 2010, and have been pretty active on committees, heading committees on the board of directors. And like any organization, if you stay around long enough, show up at enough meetings, eventually you get elected president. And so this year is my term as president.
Wow.
Uh, that was a good way. I'll definitely remember how to do it myself at some point, probably.
He's
Would need that. Cool. Okay. Let's zoom in a little bit and just talk a little bit about the local insight. So, Brandy, back to you. You've mentioned that one of the reasons you wanted to start your own business was the legality issues, and that there were a lot of people and a lot of other companies who were, kind of doing it outside the, let's say, legal aspect. Were there any
Yeah.
other sort of things that were missing in this local community that made you, come up with the ideal of the loyal transportation?
Well, it was dangerous, as a previously single mother before I had met my now husband. I had to take these illicit speedies because I couldn't afford an Uber. I couldn't afford taxi. I, for whatever circumstances had befalled me, didn't have a car, and I had two little kids. So, we would take chances and we would call these people, which was just essentially a phone number that would send somebody in the community to pick you up at your personal home address. And because they weren't vetted, and because anybody could get a job by saying, I need a job, and now their number is getting distributed your address, it was extremely dangerous. I got in a lot of dangerous circumstances that was simply because I was poor, because I didn't have access and because there wasn't any answers. So for me, it was like I wanted to have an answer to this speedy problem that we are just going to have to use this. The transit didn't make it to Bartlett Street and Thorold South. Thorold South was cut off from all of the other cities. I couldn't get food in Thorold South. I needed to go traveling on a road with no sidewalks, through a tunnel for miles with little children, or get a speedy cab. So, I mean, it wasn't that the options were there for people like me. These were the options for everyone. And that's why people were making this illicit underground speedy, is that they were solving the problem for themselves that the people that be and where our taxes go had not resolved it, not with transit or anything, for a long period of time. I'm talking speedy right now still operates in Niagara, Ontario, Canada, even while legal ones exist. And it's been in operation for 30 years.
Oh, wow.
30. So there was a problem long before I came along. I just thought I could do it better. I saw that there was an idea here. It seemed like they were just missing a piece, which might be somebody very annoying and controlling, going into meetings and sitting in and learning and going, you know what, I have something to say at the next meeting. And I did. And it made a difference. They were looking for a way to combat Uber anyways. The police that were handling licensing were having fights with taxi all the time, and they didn't want Uber there. And so I came in like, well, hold on. What if we're like a more respectful Uber? Like, we won't go do the things that were upsetting them. And they were mad that it was like unlimited licenses when they have to pay for their license, which is valid. So we said we'd have a cap on it, on how many companies or how many drivers, and we wouldn't flood the market. So, mutual respect would have solved it, but nobody came to the table to have a solution. Everybody just yelled at each other for years.
Okay, but since we're already mentioning Uber, of course, it's a clear line of thinking that since there's so many already big players like Uber, Lyft, and others, what helps you stand out?
Oh, that's easy. Honestly, Uber just is a machine. It's an uncaring machine. Somebody reports you've done something wrong. You even have dash cam. Doesn't matter. You're out of work until our computers look into it and our computers find you did nothing wrong, or you did. And then you suffer an impartial consequence, or, they're not listening. It's an uncaring machine. And so we pride ourselves on being involved. I sit and we do interviews for 2 hours and training because I want to know that I can sit in the room with with somebody you've got to sit in the car with. And we do a little bit more, and that in touch, that connection, the community that we serve respects that. They know what they're getting if they call Uber. There might be somebody there quicker, and they might be, more of them on the road, but you get a lot of care and compassion. If you had left your phone in our vehicle and you don't have the money for a return, I pay for the returns just to make sure they get their stuff back. We don't want to be a company that doesn't help. We call the police have a lot of problems in Niagara with missing people. And it seems crazy that we have access to so much information and can't assist. So from the beginning, we have been called by police and we give as much information as possible. And that's something Uber doesn't do. They just don't care. It's a big agglomerate that opens up in a new area without thought, floods the market before they're even legal. And it's just allowed because they're filling everybody's pockets, or not, because I hear arguments in the meetings that I sit in that they're not even paying for 6 months. But if I'm a day late, I get told, pay up, player. So I just wonder if it's fair.
Okay, that's actually some of the aspects that I've never heard anyone share, this the community thing and sharing and becoming like, let's say, a safe haven for
Yes.
for basically the community again. Wow, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was even making some notes because these are the things that I really would like to think about further. But Dan, I'm sure you've heard similar stories as well. From the point of TTA, what helps local companies succeed even in markets that are dominated by big tech platforms?
Well, it's interesting. I think since the introduction of Uber, and it's fine. I was living in San Francisco back in the early 2000s. I remember my black car driver that I used all the time telling me about this new app Uber and how it was going to be the best thing that ever happened to him. And I remember the early days of Uber. But I think since the introduction of Uber, there's been a settling sort of the waters a little bit, and there is a recognition of a couple things. One, it's a big market, transportation. There's a lot, it's a very big pie, and so you know you can get a slice of the pie. And I do think that the introduction of the technology that Ubers and Lyfts and other TNCs have expanded the market. It's made the market bigger. So, your slice of the pie is smaller, but it's in terms of the whole, but it's a bigger piece. But I also think, people have kind of settled down, and there are going to be people who say, hey, I want the cheapest route possible, the cheapest, fastest route possible. And they're always going to go with the cheapest, fastest route possible.
Mhm.
I was, as you can tell from my gray hair, it was a long time ago, but I was in my 20s once, and those were decisions I made. Living in New Orleans, hey, I just want to get home and the cheapest, fastest way possible, right?
Yeah.
Um, but there's also a recognition that, hey, if you want a little more, you you're not going to get that necessarily from a big company. If you want that security, you may not get, you may get it with a local company. So I think, there was the big push. Everyone went that way. It really crushed the taxi market. Now the taxi market's come back. In fact, we're having next month in Mobilize, we're our final presentation is a fireside chat of actually one of our big operators out in Los Angeles and Uber and the local regulator from Los Angeles, who are going to talk about the partnership that they formed now with Uber, where they're an essential part of the Uber ecosystem within Los Angeles. So, 10 years ago, if I had proposed, let's have a session where we talk about working with Uber to our members, it would have been the shortest presidency in the history of the TTA. But
Uh-huh.
things have changed. And so, it has had an impact. There is no doubt about it, but it's also opened people's awareness over the past few years that companies such as Brandy's offers a different service. And yes, they may not be able, and they may. I've not spent a lot of time on the other side of the falls in Niagara, but Uber may be able to get there just a little bit faster, because they might have more cars in the market. But there's a trade-off that some people want to make and some people don't. So that's been a big piece, and as it applies across beyond just taxi in the NEMT world, uh, where people are making decisions for other passengers. Right now, if I make that decision, if I decide, hey, I'm going to jump into XYZ transportation service, I've made that decision for Dan Reed, and I bear the consequences. If I'm making that decision for somebody who I have a fiduciary responsibility for, they're on a health plan that I'm in charge of, or they're in a nursing home that I own, or any number of things. People are realizing that, hey, you got to make sure you're dealing with companies that check all the boxes that you want for your passengers, because there is a difference, and 99.99% of the time it may not be a problem, but it's that 1% of the time, and that's something we run into all the time in the NEMT world. We operate with best in class securement systems and best in class cameras and software in our vehicle, and I'm never going to be able to compete on a cost basis with somebody who's willing to cut corners. And 99% of the time, they're cutting the corners may get person from A to B with no problems. But that 1% of the time, it makes a big difference if that person is your loved one or your family member or you. So that recognition, I think, is starting to level out the playing field a little bit and opening up a lot of opportunities for local companies that are willing to do more than just, as we say, unlock the door and get in the car. Right? I mean,
Yes.
that's not what it sounds like Brandy's company does. That's not what our company does. And if I want to compete on the, hey, unlock the door and get in the car, then I've got to be quicker, faster, and than everybody else. But if I want to compete on that extra service, my mom is 95 years old, and she just quit driving like 3 years ago, which I kept telling her, Mom, my business is about driving the elderly folks, and you're still driving at 92. You're not a good marketing campaign for me. But she's going to need a little extra time to get to the car, and she's going to need some help. And so that's I want to make sure that when she's transported, she's transported with a company that is going to take that time and help her.
I'm sure, well, basically, there's no brainer that Uber has not only modernized, but even created, like you then said, created that market on a different scale. They did educate people to use the technology, but there's like, and things that we keep saying to our partners, that even if you do have those giants present on your market, there's still so many potential, because they do very specific service. And it's exactly right, Brandy, like what you're doing. You create something that is more than just service. You create a part of life, and basically the part of community. And there's so many options other than just exactly price. So just the price, it's one aspect, but there's so many more. But I am grateful to Uber for actually making this such an essential part, using the technology for getting from A to B, because that okay, the biggest technology we were using was the landline before, right? And now it's different. So by the way, talking about what was before the technology, Brandy, how did you handle taking bookings and coordinate it with drivers back then?
Yeah, it was actually a crazy system. Again, I was trying to mimic what was the illegal speedy kind of system, but do it better. So my idea was they're getting a phone call in, there's a number you can always call, and I had my specific, drivers that were mostly family for the beginning. I would answer the phone, I would save their name as their name or their address so I knew where they were going every time they'd call. I had a recorder on the phone, so if I missed something, I could act confident on the phone and then listen to the recording to get the information out, to make it quick, because I knew eventually we'd have a quicker system where people are calling in, and I'm on the phone and I've got to click another person's calling in, and then I would send a message to the driver of what address they had to go to, and they would tell me the ETA, and I would go to the passenger number and remember which one is for that and say ETA, the driver is, I'd say their name and their car, and that they'd be there in that many minutes. The driver would send me a text saying here. So I'd say to that passenger here. So I was literally this middleman phone person, and they would get out and they would get in the car, and the driver would tell me clear when they had dropped off a passenger. And that meant they were open on my list of who I could give a call. Now, I wasn't very good at the where everybody was located when they would just up and tell me their address. And I had this dream I would have a map and I'd put a clear thing on it. I'd put little dots and like erase it. I did not work like slow enough for me to be able to do that. But essentially, I had this dream that I would really get this system going, and I was the best because nobody could do it. I got pregnant and I needed to have somebody get hired to do my job at least some days, at least for the Labor Day. And I tried and went through like 3 different girls. We had a binder. She would do a few hours because nobody could handle all day like me. And they'd give the binder of all the calls they'd had to remember. And it was a whole thing. I worked real hard. And on Labor Day, the girl came running back. I can't do it. And gave me the phone back. And I had no choice but to answer the phone. It was a trip, but I answered every single phone call from 7 in the morning until 12 o'clock on weekdays and 2 a.m. on weekends. And I would take Sunday off sometimes, but if the phone would go off because we have no transit, I'd work and answer it and do that too. So it was me, and more me for a long
Okay.
time.
Girl, you changed the definition of multitasking and bringing up to the whole new level with that, you know?
It's crazy.
Okay.
Nobody can do what I can do. And I mean, I don't think I could jump back and be as awesome as I used to be because I'm out of practice, but I could do it again if I had to.
Okay, but okay, with all that, I'm sure you, and yes, well, okay, I still need to process that because even listening to that made me a little bit tired already. I have no idea how you managed to handle it, but at which
So
point you actually realized that all these manual operations were just not sustainable anymore? And what was that final moment when you said, okay, let's do something differently?
I had gotten too many calls that I couldn't handle it anymore, and a new city. So we started in St. Catharines. Niagara Falls and Welland were begging for me. So I was taking those calls in different cities and managing people and drivers, having a list of what drivers situated in what city. That's when it was too much. So I had an idea. I'd just hire a dispatch like I tried before and train them like I tried before, but give them a new number. For like Niagara Falls can call that lady and it'll be slow and she could learn just like I did and she could do my job. So that didn't work out. And I just was freaking out. I had missed, 2 years of having any kind of vacation with my kids. I hadn't visited Florida, my family. I would be at grocery stores answering phone calls, pushing kids in the snow, answering phone calls. Felt like I couldn't even look in my kids' face or sing them, lullabies without answering a phone. I mean, I was done. I was having like a breakdown midsummer. That summer, I said, we have to figure something out. We have to build an app, start looking up if we could get a loan for something, because I was being told it's like $30,000 and it's just us running this operation and it's just getting a little out of hand. I can't keep doing it. Like I'm doing such a good job. Everyone's calling me and I have like 25 drivers that I go like this and manage. Crazy. So it was enough. That summer I said, you're going to have to figure something out because I can't do this anymore.
Wow. Yeah, okay, you still are my absolute personal hero hearing all these stories. But okay, and since Onde is actually the company that pays my covers my paychecks, I do have to ask, like, what made you choose Onde as your technology provider?
Well, actually, we were driving some college students, and at first we had hired them to make an app, and they did, and it was great. But when we tried to make it live, they couldn't figure out servers and having a live server. So I would have just made my own app if it was possible, but it was so darn hard. Well, another college student had heard while using Loyal, hey, I heard that you're looking for an app, and his name is Kevin James. And he said, that he worked with what was called Taxi Startup, and that he wanted to be like our manager, and he would help us out, and he got us onto the app and everything like that. So I wouldn't have trusted it if it wasn't like a real life person sitting in front of me saying like, you've got nothing else, you want to give this a shot. And I didn't have to pay $30,000 up front. I was like, oh, of course, I would love to try anything. I might die if this doesn't work out. And it was hard. My drivers, some of them were like 65, not willing to get a new cell phone that was, those kind of phones. They still had the flip phone. And I had one guy that would smash the phone in the driveway because it kept ringing, which were calls he was supposed to accept. But, and I was live. I was live handling these calls and putting them in the app and training people while still running the company. So it was a stressful time period, the transition, but it was worth it. It was worth it to do it. And I was lucky to, I guess we communicate well. We make a lot of connections being in this business, friendly, Somebody said, hey, I heard. And because of that, I found you guys. And I believed it because somebody really in person said, try.
But yes, this is the challenge. So we all are now living sort of in a digital world, but we still, you know, thrive for the true live human connection.
Authenticity.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And juggling that, being available worldwide makes you want to go and makes you need to go digital, but creating that connection is something that I personally like, and and keep saying to my team that, okay, guys, this is actually, we talk with real people. Forget about most of those scripts, they don't sound like a robot. Talk to real people because they have real stories to tell, and we can make
Really work.
and help them, yes, like do something that they were not able to do before us. So it's
Mhm.
incredible, and thank you so much for choosing us in that aspect, that we can get connected to the incredible story that you are now sort of writing with every day that you in the business.
That's it.
Thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
then I think that you've also seen many operators, and I think that even yourself, you've gone through this transformation from non-tech to highly tech providers. So, how would you describe what are the most common challenges in that transition?
Well, it's getting adoption, and understanding exactly what the system you're putting in place does and doesn't do, and then figuring out how to change your processes to work within that system, and or change that system to that software to meet your needs. There's not a universal uh, software out there that meets every demand for every single company. So you have to figure out which one's going to work the best for you, and how do you make it work. Um, when we converted from paper logs, and uh, it was um, like about 2012, 2013. And it wasn't that, I mean, we supplied the tablets to the drivers because we have employee drivers. So we supplied
Mhm.
the tablets, we gave them the technology that they needed. And it hasn't been, it wasn't overly painful. Some of the issues that you run into, um, just from an NEMT perspective, on-time performance is very key because you're taking people to medical appointments.
Yes.
Um, when you're on paper logs, nobody reports trips 5 to 10 minutes late when you're writing down the time you arrived, right? You look, your driver arrives at 9:05 for a 9 o'clock appointment. They always arrived at 8:59. Um,
Yep.
when you're on technology, it's what time you arrive, right? I mean, it's when you hit uh, arrived, it records that time. And if you try to hit arrive early and you're not at the location, well, then it records
It's
that you're not at the
easy.
location. So, so getting everybody to understand that where you may have been able to, have some shortcuts, you don't now. But then
Mm-hmm.
also taking advantage. Now, move forward to today, it is really gone from, you know, everything being analog to everything being digital, and how do you take advantage of all that data? I mean, that's, in fact, I've got a meeting this afternoon with some graduate students at the local university to put together, to start working on how to pull our data together, because we have our cameras and our dispatching software and our HR and our fuel cards and our fleet maintenance, and all of that data is great. But when I sit and extract that data from each of the data sets, and then I put it into Excel and I play with it, and then I get it and I find out exactly what I'm looking for, it's a month and a half later, and the problem that I was looking for is history, and I've got new problems I should be dealing, right? So now,
Yep.
it's how do you take advantage of that, and don't, not overwhelm yourself, but come to some great, like our new camera system, um, that we're looking at a camera system that has great analytics, to where you can start to say, show me where my driver's speed have the highest occurrence of speeding. And now, I can start to look at that in a real world. It's this stretch of the highway, or it's right here. And you can now work with your dispatching software to pop up a little message when they're coming into that location. Hey, be sure to slow down. Where are my drivers having trouble coming to a full stop at a stop sign? And you can start popping reminders in. So now you're not in a mode of using data to see what happened. You're in a mode of using data to prevent things from happening. So, it's really staying. I mean, the challenge is using your data in a productive way right now, because the data's out there and it's so much. And as you start to whittle it down and play with it more, you can really become, you know, uh, you can start, we're a very, I don't know how things are up in Niagara Falls, but it's a low margin business that we operate in, right? So, you knock a percent here, a percent there, and it has a real big impact on the bottom line. And that's what we're looking to do right now with data. And that's what the TTA is very focused on right now, is how is how can operators use their data to better their fleets and their operations.
Okay, so that brings to the next question, like to see whether technology is the only way forward, or are there still operators that are thriving, like doing things the more or less traditional way?
I
What
mean,
do you mean?
there are operators that are still, probably not completely analog, but yeah, there are still operators, but I just don't know that you limit how much you can do if you do that. I mean, Brandy could not be in Florida and think about running an operation in Niagara and in Florida if everything's analog. When if I go back to our company in the early 2012 2013, we were running probably about 80 vehicles. I was I knew I felt more uncomfortable about what was going on than I do now, where I'm operating 125 vehicles across 2 states, because I
Right.
can go on right now and see where everybody is. I mean, I could
Yep.
find out where every one of my vehicles is right now. The problem that Brandy was talking about of having to have a map and a piece of paper, that's not there anymore. I can just go online and see. I can see who's doing what. I can see what trips are on time. So, you could continue to operate without employing technology, but you're really going to limit yourself, and you're going to limit your ability to expand into new markets, because quite a few paying sources are just demanding it. Right? They
Mhm.
don't want to work with somebody that the only solution is to call me and book a trip. They don't want to work with somebody, that you have to fax me your trip request. People want to, that's, again, we go back to what we talked about. What did Uber and Lyft bring to the world? They brought that desire to have that. And for a long time, there were a lot of people who thought they were the only ones who had that. Well, that's not true. You can be a taxi company in Niagara Falls. You can be an NEMT company in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, or anywhere in the country, and have pretty much that same technology that Uber and Lyft have in terms of that
Yep.
ability to do that. And So if you want to be able to expand, if you want to go into other markets, if you want to not be just relying on, the people who know you got to employ technology these days.
Thank you. That reminded me. I have a 16-year-old son, and a few years back, he asked me, Mama, what is a fax? And when I started describing what a fax was, he was like, what do you mean sending a paper? He actually thought that it was something that would send an actual piece of paper somewhere else. That was so right now, I cannot imagine the world without the technology moving forward. And the thing is that the newest generation, they don't even know how to do it any other way than on their phones. And okay, but let's now look a little bit more globally, like, zoom out a little bit. So Dan, can I ask you to? I'm sure you have tons of team members that analyze so many aspects of the industry, the trends, and everything. So, what are those main trends and shifts that you're seeing right now, especially that would affect the small or mid-sized operators?
Well, I'd say the biggest trends are trend diversification, right?
Okay.
You can't just be a taxi company anymore. You can't just be an NEMT company. One of the past presidents uh, for the Transportation Alliance, a guy by the name of Tom Arrighi up in Massachusetts, he told me early on, he said, Dan, if you're looking out your window and you see a car go by and somebody's sitting in the back seat, you should ask yourself, why isn't that my vehicle? And he said, and it doesn't matter what they're doing. You should ask yourself, why aren't I doing that transportation? And so that is a trend. And that's, again, why the Transportation Alliance went from TLPA to the Transportation Alliance. So hey, you can do everything, someday, you can do microtransit and you can be doing NEMT because now you have the software to do all that. The obviously how AVs and autonomous vehicles are going to impact the industry is a big one. But I was just at a conference in Nashville last week, International Association of Transportation Regulators. And, a lot of the discussion wasn't that it's going to completely replace, because first off, no one really knows. Is it going to be the Waymo model where Waymo owns everything? Is it going to be more the Tesla model where you own the vehicle? No one knows what model is going to take place yet. But, I was talking, one of our drivers, Mary Jones, she won the IATR Driver of the Year. And so she was at the conference with me. And, of course, the driver starts hearing about autonomous vehicles and they're like, hey, that doesn't sound great for me. But I said, but think about it, Mary, you transport people to and from medical appointments. And some of what you do are elderly people or some behavioral people. I said, if you were an autonomous vehicle, you would still be there, but now you could focus on the patients and you're not focusing on driving and the patients. So, it changes what you're going to do, but it doesn't necessarily eliminate your position. But it takes that driving out. So autonomous vehicles are a huge, and then just how you integrate the AI aspects into everything you're doing right now. Those are really kind of the big trends. Of course, here in the States, what's going to happen with, um, healthcare, transportation, and there's a lot of questions around funding and those issues, and um, that's got a lot of people wondering, what contracts are going to be good and what contracts are not, and if you're in microtransit, but really the big trends right now are the kind of diversifying and the and that ability to, you know I mean, if someone as we, the limousine industry has done a great job for years of their affinity program, their affiliate program, right? Whenever they take someone to the airport, they're in contact generally with a colleague in another city to do the transportation of somebody at the other end of the airport. That's something the taxi industry, the NEMT industry really not focused on a lot. But, you know, you think about it, it's the same thing. Every time you're taking somebody to the airport or the train station, they're going to get to the other end of their trip and they're going to need similar accommodations generally. And so why, now with the technology that's available, it's a lot easier to have a colleague, uh, say in Florida, that, I can, hey, reach out, Brandy, I've got a passenger who's flying in, do you have a, capability to pick them up at the airport? I got somebody who's just got married and they're honeymooning at Niagara Falls. Do you have, can you pick these people? Those sort of things are really starting to expand the global reach and the footprint of small operators, even if you're just in a small town in Mississippi.
But that requires sort of a different vision, because it has been sort of traditionally and expected to see each other as a competition, even if located in different locations. But now understanding that, and that's brilliant what you're sharing, seeing that you can no longer view each other as a competition per se, but rather as cooperation where you can both benefit. The win-win scenarios are there, but it just requires, to sort of see that.
That's absolutely true. And I would say that is, if there's one thing about the Transportation Alliance that, to me is one of the biggest benefits, is the networking opportunities. The ability on a monthly basis to get on one of our steering committee calls or at our, live functions or our webinars, to network with people, talk to people, and understand. Again, it goes back to, the pie is so big, you can't do it all, right?
Yeah.
So you got to find a way to do it better, and that networking, and not everybody's your competition. Sure, the guy right next to you with 10 vehicles may be your competition on a lot of things, but not always. And you got to recognize that you're going to compete on contracts, but there's going to be times where you can work together. That's a big shift that has happened, I think, in this industry. And it's really one that is opening up the industry to dialogue and allowing everyone to improve themselves, because no one's keeping the secrets to themselves. You come to Vegas next month at Mobilize, and there's companies sharing their ideas openly of how they do things, whether it's a 2 vehicle company or 1,000 fleet company, um, 1,000 vehicle fleet company. They're sharing their ideas, and that makes everybody better.
Yeah.
I actually now have written your phrase down, and I'm going to be using it then. So you can't do it all, but you need to find a way to do it better. That pretty much sums up everything that we stand for. This is beautiful. But also, apart from networking, you've mentioned regulations. You visit the conferences on regulations. How does TTA helps members stay ahead of, or at least in line of, new policies and compliance requirements?
So we have a lobbying arm, a
Mhm.
pretty strong advocacy arm. We have a PAC, a political action committee fund, and we every year set out. In fact, we have a call later this afternoon, our government relations committee, and we set out our agenda. And it is things we'd like to accomplish, things we'd like to make sure don't get accomplished, and things that that pop up along the way. So that committee, and we have a lobbyist, a full-time lobbyist in Washington, D.C. And that committee is a very strong part of the TTA. And so, this year we had several different uh, pieces we're working on, making sure, trying to get regulations requiring microtransit to at least be put out to bid to local operators. We spent a lot of time early in the year making sure that NEMT was, people understood the importance of NEMT and Medicaid funding, because that obviously was a big issue in the states here early on. We have policies on several different uh, priorities that we're working on. Independent contractors, maintaining the independent contractor status. So those we have that, and that's That's a very big key. We communicate that information out to our members. We make it available. We've been encouraging over the recent years the formation of local organizations, sort of sub organizations within each state, because a lot of what you need to do is done at the state. That didn't happen a few years ago when everyone was a competitor. You couldn't get everyone in the room. Now people realize, okay, we're competitors, but we've got a common interest in accomplishing goals. So that's another item. And then we have our steering committee. So this past year we had safety and loss control, operations, and business development. They met once a month, talked about different topics, and then had open forum discussions at the end of those. Next year, we're adding AIAV, kind of our technology, and AIAV steering committee, because again, that's a big piece. So those trends are presented, and we're bringing industry experts on the monthly calls. We have webinars. We do a fly-in in April to DC, and that's where we come in, we meet, we discuss what progress we've made, what are our big key positions, then everyone goes and meets with their representatives and senators on the Hill to talk about our issues. We have open houses, which have been very successful this past year. Not huge, so anywhere between 5 to maybe 15 providers meet at different locations. So we had one in Phoenix, one in Akron, Ohio, one in Indianapolis. Those two were actually at vehicle manufacturer conversion companies, Bronability and Driverge, which was really neat because we got to see their factories. We had one in Boston, one in Grand Junction, and one in Montreal. And you just come in and you the host company presents what they're doing, some of the neat things they've done, and everyone has a possibility to talk about how they're doing it or how they might do it, or different discussion points on different topics. So we're constantly, our theme this year was drive value to our members. That was our key. Anything we could, we have a newsletter that goes out every month. We have an RFP database, so all of our members can go on and see any RFP that's been issued in the United States, for services in any jurisdiction. So we try to always be out in front of of growing trends and keeping our members informed.
Wow. Okay. Sounds like TTA is sort of also multitasking on a different scale, becoming like business advisor, lobbyist, industry therapist, networking organizer, and maybe part-time peacekeeper.
Yeah, it's a very active organization, and again, it's member driven. So it's not a trade association that's basically the whole industry. It is fleet owner driven, and so it allows us to really keep our focus. We do a lot, but we have a focus on fleet operators. And they're not everybody agrees on everything, right? I'm an employer-based company. I for me, independent contractors are not a big issue because I don't use them, and in fact, it's sometimes it's almost harder for me to compete with companies that have independent contractors. But it's such a big key part of our industry that as an association, it is one of our core values, one of our core missions is to preserve independent contractors. That it's an area where, okay, I say that it doesn't, it's not important to me, but it's important to the industry, and so we focus on it. There's other areas where, on the NEMT side, we want to make sure everyone has good, solid background checks and training. Not everybody necessarily wants to have that, but they know that that's really the right thing. And so, when we advocate for it, everyone gets on board with it.
Okay. So back to Brandy, like hearing what Dan been describing, Does that resonate with you? Do you have maybe mentors or associations, communities that you rely on, that you're a part of, or would like to become one?
Well, there's a lot of things that are similar that we do that don't have any good big titles, and we're not doing it en masse, right? Because it sounds like Dan handles a lot more than we do. We're a very small region, and as long as we're on top of the region, there is somebody that makes sure to pay attention and represents us. If I don't want something to happen, like they're changing the fees or they're demanding something I can't comply with, so we need to fight our reasoning before it's law, and now we have to deal with it. I have people in place to do the same kind of thing. Even working with other businesses, there was a time when other companies were getting overwhelmed with calls, but they knew we could handle it. And we were their competition, but they wanted to look like they could handle the calls by sending their people a car, but it'd be a loyal. It was completely against like the typical. However, there became a need where, they would be willing to work with a competitor just so that they could provide good service. So we were almost like, you're respecting that I provide good service. So the same kind of thing has happened where we tried to conjoin with other great businesses. I think that communication and working together is the key. That was my whole pinnacle argument about the taxi was rightfully upset at Uber, and it was unfair. And we can't solve that because Uber's already here with money. So what can we do? We can run them out of town because I run a better of what they're doing than they did. And that actually did occur in our area. The Toronto is where the hub is to hire onto Uber. And it used to be in Niagara region, but there weren't enough applying drivers to have everybody come to the region that they've moved the hub to Toronto. And that was around the time when we were like maybe year one, year two. And we weren't doing anything spectacular other than caring. We actually answered it. We had the same people stay for a long time. And I think that's the other big benefit is like, I don't discard people when they have a problem. We'll do dash cams, but they are private contractors for Loyal. We do not have employees. So since all of the work is on you, all of the risk is on you, I will additionally help you get customers. I will additionally support and manage so that the company itself looks great, but my operators are in complete responsibility for whatever it is that we have to comply with. You need a TNC license. You got to come in for a safety every 6 months because your kilometers are immense. Whatever it is that they demand of us, you must comply with. And my job is just to make sure that you keep complying. And I work with, we have Merrittville Speedway. We do all kinds of sponsorships. We've gone on 97.7 and made, ads for advertising, but we also support like Grape and Wine. So when small community events happen and everybody gets together and travels from Niagara on the Lake all the way to Port Colborne, we've got our drivers aware in advance. We are going to be busy and you're going to be handling a lot of people going to this event, and I want you to be on top of it. We monitor in the same aspect where we really love that if a driver says that they were there on time, I could look very quickly and say, you might have swiped to arrive, but I see that you're on Ferry Street and that's not the pickup address. So no, you weren't on time. And then we can hold them accountable, which helps them do better in the future. And unlike Uber, I didn't just cancel their app because they lied to me. I help them understand that we can monitor. I help them understand that if you need and somebody's saying something's happening, we have the right to listen to the customer and you have the right to record. So where's your dash cam if you didn't do these things? The taxi is sounding, or the system that Dan provides sounds like they're a little more on top of it with their information, which is good. But for me, I find the only time the information is valuable is when it is causing an issue and I have to respond, because otherwise everything seems to be going well. And I'm very vocally like in presence where if you wanted to complain to the owner, you can send your complaints. People Google review, they are happy to tell you what sucks. So if it sucks, I know about it. And if it does, then I have a job to do to find out who's telling the truth. And the machine definitely, it assists. It assists both that I can listen to both parties. I can see what actually happened on paper, so to speak, but it's a computer. But, I can see the facts in front of me. And it's really assisted us having these systems. I think I would love to do more of, those meetings again, like when I was in person in Niagara. My representatives are just one person and not an entire bunch of people. I have a small group of managers that are respected people that I ask advice, even though I kind of know where I'm going. I want to hear you say that that's a good idea because, maybe I'm wrong and you're really physically there. Maybe something's changed that I've missed. I like to be involved so that I know what you know by listening as well. But the groups and the systems, it sounds very complex, but usable. I mean, what we can do when I ask David to check over everybody's their ignored rate. Like you already have an algorithm that's changing whether they get more or less if they have a bad ignore rate. But I kind of want to know why you're on the app ignoring calls. So me having a system that shows me that month, the 10 worst, I can have a conversation with their performance and why are you like, what is the reason you'll be online, see a need while you're at work and then just ignore it and let it pass you by? This is excessive. So I like having the systems to be able to do that. And yeah, maybe some more formative groups would be better for us, but we're small. So I feel like we slowly learn by hearing, oh, that's a good idea. I should probably be doing that.
Okay. I think that, well, basically we need to wrap it up because we are already at the end of the hour. I was like, basically I had planned some more questions, but we'll leave them out. And one of the questions was, what's next? But let me answer it for all of us here. The next would be hopefully us all meeting at Mobilize next month in Las Vegas, and we could discuss more of the ideas and trends and news and plans and what so. We also have two questions that were posted in our Q&A session of the chat. If you need to apologize, but I will ask those questions because well, I think one is for me, the other one is for Brandy. We will ask those questions and we will send answers to your mails, guys, so that we don't keep everybody too long on this Friday night. And with that, let me say one more time, guys, thank you so much for dedicating that time to talk to me and to answer some questions that we've prepared and our partners prepared, and making it such a cozy, engaging, and inspiring experience for hopefully everyone who was with us today here. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your Fridays. Have a wonderful weekend. The kitty is actually absolutely adorable.
She couldn't stop herself. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Appreciated it. See
Thank
y'all in
you.
Vegas.
See you in
Yeah.
Vegas. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.